Long before printing presses filled Europe with books, long before libraries stood in every great city, there were places where every single page had to be written by hand, one careful letter at a time. High among the mist-covered mountains of northern Europe stood Saint Aurelius Monastery. It rested upon a lonely ridge where cold winds drifted through ancient pine forests and morning clouds often settled below the stone walls instead of above them. Travelers rarely found the monastery by accident. The road leading there was narrow, quiet, and surprisingly ordinary. No towering gates guarded its entrance, no soldiers patrolled its walls. From a distance, Saint Aurelius looked less like a fortress and more like a peaceful collection of gray stone buildings gathered around a small chapel. Yet people across kingdoms spoke about it with quiet respect, not because of hidden treasure, not because of miracles, but because of a single book. For nearly 300 years, the monks of Saint Aurelius had been copying the very same manuscript, generation after generation. The work never stopped. When one monk grew too old to continue, another quietly took his place. The handwriting changed, the ink changed, even the language slowly evolved through the centuries, but the book remained the same. Nobody outside the monastery had ever read it from beginning to end. Very few had even seen it. Stories about the manuscript spread across Europe. Some believed it contained forgotten knowledge from the ancient world. Others whispered that kings had once offered entire fortunes just to borrow a single page. A few insisted the book described a lost civilization that had vanished before history was ever written. The monks never confirmed any story. They simply continued writing. In a quiet riverside town nearly 200 miles away lived a young manuscript copyist named Thomas. He was 24 years old, patient, curious, and known among local monasteries for their remarkable steadiness of his hand. Unlike many scribes who hurried through their work, Thomas believed every page deserved the same care as the first. Even ordinary prayer books received beautiful lettering beneath his pen. One autumn afternoon, while repairing a damaged collection of old sermons, he discovered something unusual tucked inside the back cover: a folded letter. Its parchment had turned almost golden with age. Across the front appeared only 4 words: "For Saint Aurelius only." Thomas frowned. The monastery named in the letter no longer belonged to any map he owned. His employer, an elderly priest named Brother Martin, smiled quietly when Thomas asked about it. "So, you finally found the letter. You knew it was there?" Brother Martin nodded. "My teacher left it for me, and his teacher left it for him." Thomas looked puzzled. Then why was it never delivered? The old priest closed the worn book gently. "Because it was never our turn." Those words stayed with Thomas long after sunset. It was never our turn. He had copied hundreds of manuscripts over the years, yet no sentence had ever puzzled him more. The following morning he returned to Brother Martin. "May I ask another question?" "Of course. What happens if I deliver the letter?" The old priest smiled warmly. "Then perhaps it finally becomes your turn." 3 days later, Thomas packed everything he owned into a simple leather satchel: a spare wool cloak, a small loaf of bread, a wooden ink box, 2 fresh quills, and the mysterious letter. Nothing more. Brother Martin walked with him to the edge of the village. "You'll find many roads, but only one leads to Saint Aurelius." "How will I know which one?" The old priest pointed toward the distant mountains hidden beneath morning mist. "The correct road always becomes quieter." The journey lasted nearly 3 weeks. Thomas crossed gentle rivers over ancient stone bridges. He passed vineyards preparing for harvest, walked through forests where golden leaves covered forgotten paths, stayed in tiny village inns where travelers exchanged stories beside warm fireplaces. Whenever he mentioned Saint Aurelius, people grew thoughtful. Some had heard of it, most had not, but everyone seemed to know one strange detail. The monks are always writing. One rainy evening, Thomas arrived at a small shepherd's cottage high in the mountains. The elderly shepherd welcomed him inside without asking many questions. After supper, the old man noticed the folded letter resting beside Thomas's satchel. His eyes widened slightly. "You're climbing to the monastery?" Thomas nodded. "If I can find it." The shepherd smiled. "You will. Have you been there?" "Once." "What was it like?" The old man stared into the fire for a long moment. Finally he answered, "I have never heard such silence." Thomas laughed softly. "Surely every monastery is quiet." The old man slowly shook his head. No, this silence wasn't empty. It sounded, he searched carefully for the right word, full. Before sunrise the next morning, the shepherd walked with Thomas to the highest hill overlooking the valley. The mist slowly drifted apart, and there, far above the clouds, Thomas saw it for the first time, Saint Aurelius Monastery. Its weathered gray stone walls seemed almost part of the mountain itself. A slender bell tower rose quietly above rows of slate rooftops. Thin streams of chimney smoke curled into the crisp autumn sky. No banners, no guards, no noise, only peaceful stillness. The shepherd placed one hand gently upon Thomas's shoulder. "They have been waiting." Thomas looked surprised. "For me?" The old man smiled. "No, for the letter." Thomas looked again toward the monastery. The folded parchment suddenly felt much heavier inside his satchel. Far above, a single bronze bell rang once across the mountains. Its quiet echo drifted through the morning air. And without quite knowing why, Thomas felt that someone beyond those ancient stone walls already knew he was coming.
Thomas stood quietly before the enormous manuscript. For several moments, neither he nor Brother Gabriel spoke. The book commanded silence without asking for it. Its weathered leather cover bore no title, no royal seal, no gilded decoration, only a small symbol pressed into the center, a single candle, its flames surrounded by a simple circle. Thomas gently traced the symbol with his eyes. "What does it mean?" Brother Gabriel smiled softly. "We've been asking that question for almost 300 years. Thomas looked surprised. "You don't know?" "We know many stories, but no certainty." He rested one ink-stained hand upon the edge of the great table. "Some believe it represents knowledge. Others believe it represents hope. A few think it reminds us that even the smallest light can survive a long night." Thomas nodded quietly. "I like that one." "So do I." The great manuscript remained closed. Thomas waited patiently. Finally, he asked, "May I see it?" Brother Gabriel looked toward the far end of the room. An elderly monk sat there writing beneath a tall window. His hair was completely white, his back slightly bent, yet every movement remained wonderfully steady. Brother Gabriel smiled. "Only Brother Matthias may open the book." The old monk slowly stood, without hurry, without ceremony. He walked across the room carrying nothing except a clean linen cloth. When he reached the table, he carefully wiped every trace of dust from the leather cover. Only then did he gently lift it open. The thick parchment pages gave off the faint scent of oak, ink, and thyme. Thomas had copied hundreds of books in his life. He had never seen parchment preserved so beautifully. The first page contained only one sentence, written in elegant Latin. Brother Gabriel quietly translated, "Knowledge belongs to no generation alone." Nothing else. Thomas turned the page. The second contained another single sentence. "Every hand borrows the work of the one before it." The third, "Write carefully. Someone not yet born will trust your words." Thomas smiled. "They're beautiful." "They're reminders," Brother Gabriel replied. "Every monk begins here." As the pages continued, the manuscript slowly changed. Simple sayings gave way to carefully copied histories, ancient poems, maps, medical observations, astronomical charts, descriptions of rivers, mountains, plants, languages, songs, letters, even recipes preserved from villages that no longer existed. It wasn't one book, it was hundreds of books living together. Thomas turned another page. The handwriting changed. Brother Gabriel noticed immediately. "You see it? The writing is different." "Exactly. How many people have copied this?" The old monk thought for a moment. "We estimate about 400. Thomas looked astonished. 400 scribes? Brother Gabriel nodded. "Some worked here 50 years, some only 5, but every one left the page a little stronger than they found it." Near the middle of the manuscript, Thomas noticed something unexpected. One page remained unfinished. Only half the text had been copied. The rest of the parchment was completely blank. He looked puzzled. Why was this page never completed? Brother Gabriel smiled. "It has been waiting." "For whom?" The old monk looked directly at Thomas. "For the next careful hand." Thomas blinked. "You mean?" Brother Gabriel nodded. "The letter you carried here was asking whether someone was finally ready." Thomas looked back toward the unfinished page. His heart began beating just a little faster. "I've only just arrived." "So had every monk before you." Matthias quietly approached, carrying a small wooden case. Inside rested 3 freshly cut goose-feather quills, a bottle of deep black oak gall ink, and a smooth stone used for steadying the writer's hand. He placed them gently before Thomas. No speech, no instructions, only a warm smile. Then he returned to his desk. Thomas looked at Brother Gabriel. "What happens if I make a mistake?" The old monk chuckled softly. "Then someone after you will carefully repair it. And if they make a mistake, the next generation will help them." Thomas laughed. "So no page is ever truly finished." Brother Gabriel smiled. "Now you're beginning to understand." As afternoon sunlight slowly crossed the scriptorium floor, Thomas dipped the feather quill into the fresh black oak ink. He held it above the unfinished page. His hand remained perfectly still. Around him, 40 monks continued writing in peaceful silence. The gentle scratching of quills filled the room like quiet rain. Thomas lowered the tip of his pen, and with one slow, careful stroke, he wrote the very first word of a page that had waited nearly 80 years to be completed. Far outside the monastery, the bronze bell rang softly across the mountains, not to announce the hour, but to welcome another hand into a story that had been written for 300 years.
The climb to Saint Aurelius Monastery was quieter than Thomas had imagined. There were no villages beyond the shepherd's cottage, no market roads, no passing merchants, only a narrow stone path winding steadily upward through ancient pine forests. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became. Even the birds seemed to sing more softly. Only the wind moved freely between the trees. By midday, Thomas reached the monastery gates. They were surprisingly modest, a pair of weathered oak doors set into a low stone wall. No guards stood watch, no banners displayed the monastery's name. Only a simple wooden cross rested above the entrance. Beside the gate hung a small bronze bell. Below it, a wooden sign carried just 5 words: "Enter with a quiet heart." Thomas smiled. He gently rang the bell once. Its soft tone drifted across the courtyard. Almost immediately, the door opened. Standing before him was an elderly monk wearing a plain brown wool robe. His white hair was cropped short. His hands were stained with tiny traces of black ink. He looked more like a craftsman than a scholar. Without asking Thomas's name, the monk smiled warmly. "You've brought the letter." Thomas stopped in surprise. "You knew?" The monk nodded gently. "We've been expecting it." "For how long?" The old monk thought carefully. "About 73 years." Thomas blinked. 73 years? The monk stepped aside. "Come inside. You've had a long journey." The monastery courtyard was unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. Instead of grand stone statues, there were vegetable gardens, apple trees, rows of herbs growing beside narrow pathways. Several monks quietly tended flowers, while others carried baskets of fresh bread from a small bakery. Nobody hurried, nobody shouted. Everyone moved with calm purpose. The entire place felt as though time itself had slowed down. As Thomas crossed the courtyard, he noticed something unusual. Every monk carried ink stains somewhere, on their fingers, on their sleeves, sometimes even along the edges of their robes. It was impossible not to notice. The elderly monk smiled when he saw Thomas looking. "Writing leaves its mark." Thomas laughed softly. "I suppose it does." "Eventually," the monk replied, "it leaves its mark on more than your hands." After a simple midday meal of fresh bread, vegetable soup, and mountain cheese, the monk introduced himself. "My name is Brother Gabriel. I care for the scriptorium." Thomas recognized the word immediately, the room where manuscripts were copied. He carefully removed the folded letter from his satchel. "I believe this belongs here." Brother Gabriel accepted it with extraordinary care. He didn't open it. Instead, he gently placed it inside a small wooden box resting nearby. Thomas looked puzzled. "Aren't you going to read it?" The old monk smiled. "Not yet." "When?" "This evening." "Why wait?" "Because letters deserve rested eyes." The answer sounded so simple, yet somehow completely reasonable. Thomas was beginning to understand that Saint Aurelius followed a different rhythm than the rest of the world. Nothing important was ever rushed. That afternoon, Brother Gabriel finally led Thomas toward the heart of the monastery. A long stone building stood quietly beside the chapel. Its windows were unusually tall. Warm afternoon sunlight poured through the narrow glass. "This," Brother Gabriel said softly, "is the scriptorium." Before opening the heavy oak door, he paused. "One request." Thomas nodded. "Inside," he said, "listen before you look." Thomas frowned slightly. Still, he agreed. The door opened. At first, he saw nothing. He simply stood still with his eyes lowered. Then he heard it. Not silence, not exactly. The gentle scratching of dozens of feather quills moving across parchment. Soft, steady, almost musical. Occasionally, a page turned, a bottle of ink was lifted quietly, a chair shifted gently across the stone floor. Nothing more. The entire place felt as though time itself breathed. Only after several moments did Brother Gabriel whisper, "Now," he said, "you may look." Thomas slowly raised his eyes. The sight took his breath away. More than 40 monks sat at long oak tables beneath streams of warm sunlight.
Each worked quietly on handwritten manuscripts. Some copied elegant Latin text, others painted colorful illuminated letters in brilliant shades of blue, red, and gold. Several older monks carefully repaired books whose pages were beginning to crumble with age. Nobody hurried, nobody shouted. Everyone moved with remarkable patience. At the center of the room, separated from every other desk, sat one enormous wooden table. Upon it rested one single manuscript. Unlike every other book, this one was enormous. Its thick leather cover looked centuries old. Heavy brass corners protected each edge. Several candles burned nearby, despite the bright afternoon sunlight. Thomas stared at it. Without asking, he somehow knew. Brother Gabriel quietly confirmed his thought. "That," he said, "is the book." The very manuscript that generations had copied for nearly 300 years. It rested before him, peacefully waiting, as though it had all the time in the world. And perhaps it truly did.
The tip of Thomas's quill touched the parchment. One careful stroke, then another. The ink flowed smoothly across the page, settling into the ancient fibers as though it had been waiting for this moment. No one in the scriptorium looked up, not because they were uninterested, but because every monk understood something Thomas had not yet learned. The first word always belonged to silence. Thomas wrote slowly. Every letter received his complete attention. Years of copying manuscripts had trained his hand to remain steady, yet today felt different. He wasn't simply copying another book. He was continuing a conversation that had begun centuries before he was born. That thought alone made every line feel heavier, not with pressure, but with responsibility. When the first sentence was complete, Brother Gabriel quietly approached. He studied the page without speaking. Finally, he smiled. "You left enough space." Thomas was puzzled. Enough space for what? For the future. Brother Gabriel pointed to the generous margins surrounding the text. Every generation discovers something the previous one could not. If we fill every empty place, we leave no room for wisdom yet to come. Thomas glanced at the blank edges of the parchment. For the first time, he realized they had never been wasted space. They were invitations. As the afternoon passed, Thomas watched the other monks more carefully. No two worked exactly alike. One elderly scribe copied each sentence aloud in a whisper before writing it. Another paused after every paragraph to sharpen his quill. A younger monk carefully mixed fresh ink from crushed oak galls, rainwater, and iron salts. Nothing was rushed. Every movement had been refined through decades of quiet practice. The room itself seemed to breathe with patient rhythm. Near sunset, Brother Matthias closed his manuscript. He gently cleaned his quill, then carried a small wooden tray through the scriptorium. Upon it rested dozens of tiny glass bottles. Each contained ink of a slightly different shade. Thomas examined them closely. Some appeared almost black. Others carried warm brown tones. A few looked faintly blue. Why so many colors? Brother Matthias smiled. The ink changes. The words do not. He handed Thomas one bottle. This one was mixed yesterday. Then he lifted another. This one was prepared 38 years ago. Thomas blinked. "You still use ink that old?" Brother Gabriel answered, "When properly made, good ink is more patient than people." That evening, after supper, Thomas finally remembered the mysterious letter. "The one I delivered. Have you read it?" Brother Gabriel nodded. "We have." "What did it say?" The old monk reached into his robe. Instead of handing Thomas the original, he offered a carefully copied page. "We never keep private letters.
We preserve them." Thomas unfolded it. The handwriting belonged to Brother Martin, the priest who had sent him. The letter read, "To the brothers of Saint Aurelius. The young man carrying this letter possesses something rarer than beautiful handwriting. He is willing to leave a page unfinished if truth requires it. Please teach him what cannot be learned from books alone." Thomas lowered the page. His face grew warm. "I didn't know he thought that." Brother Gabriel smiled. "Perhaps he hoped you never would." Later that night, Thomas wandered through the monastery gardens beneath a sky filled with stars. The mountain air carried the scent of pine trees and damp earth. Everything felt wonderfully still. Then he noticed a monk sitting alone beside a small stone fountain. The old man held no book, no quill, only a simple cup of tea. Thomas sat beside him. "You aren't writing tonight?" The monk chuckled. "I've been writing for 62 years. Sometimes the best thing a writer can do is stop." They watched the stars together. Neither felt the need to continue speaking. The following morning, Thomas returned to the scriptorium before sunrise. The room was already alive with quiet work. Candles flickered gently across the long oak tables. Outside, rain tapped softly against the tall windows. Brother Gabriel greeted him with an unexpected request. "Today, I would like you to copy a mistake." Thomas frowned. "A mistake?" The old monk nodded. He opened another ancient manuscript. Near the center of one page rested a single misspelled word. Someone long ago had carefully circled it in red ink, but they never erased it. Thomas looked confused. "Shouldn't I correct it?" Brother Gabriel smiled. "No, you should copy it exactly." "But why?" The old monk closed the manuscript gently. "Because that mistake reminds us that even careful hands belong to human beings." He looked towards the endless shelves of books surrounding them. "A perfect book teaches knowledge. An imperfect book teaches humility." Thomas slowly nodded. Perhaps that lesson was even more valuable. As he dipped his quill into fresh ink once again, he realized the monks of Saint Aurelius had never spent 300 years protecting a single book. They had spent 300 years protecting the quiet discipline of learning without ever believing they had learned enough. And somewhere deep beneath the monastery, hidden below the oldest library, a locked wooden door had remained unopened for nearly 100 years. Only the abbot carried its key. And before the week was over, Thomas would discover why no scribe was allowed to enter it alone.
The rain continued through the night. By dawn, gentle drops still tapped against the tall windows of the scriptorium, filling the room with a quiet rhythm that blended perfectly with the soft scratching of quills upon parchment. Thomas had begun to recognize the monastery's own music. Rain, turning pages, flowing ink, the distant bell. None of it interrupted the silence. It became part of it. For several hours, Thomas worked beside Brother Matthias, carefully copying another section of the great manuscript. The passage described how ancient scholars had preserved knowledge during years of famine. There were no stories of famous kings, no glorious battles, only ordinary people carrying books across mountains so future generations would not lose them forever. Thomas smiled quietly. It seemed every page of the manuscript carried the same lesson in a different form. Knowledge survived because someone cared enough to protect it. As midday approached, the monastery bell rang twice. Every monk gently laid down his quill at exactly the same moment, not because the page had ended, but because the hour had. Brother Gabriel noticed Thomas looking around. "The words can wait," he smiled. "The people should not." The monks gathered for a simple meal of warm barley soup, fresh bread, apples from the monastery orchard, and mountain honey. Conversation remained gentle. No one spoke loudly. Several monks discussed repairing a leaking roof. Another spoke about planting herbs before winter. One elderly brother quietly laughed while telling a story about a stubborn goat that had wandered into the vegetable garden that morning. Nothing extraordinary happened, yet Thomas found himself enjoying the meal more than many grand feasts he had attended elsewhere. After lunch, the abbot finally arrived. Thomas had heard about him since entering Saint Aurelius, yet this was the first time they had met. Abbot Benedict was older than anyone Thomas had ever known. His beard was completely white, his movements slow but remarkably steady. His eyes, however, were bright with quiet curiosity. Instead of greeting Thomas with questions, he simply smiled. "So, you're the young man who leaves room in the margins." Thomas looked surprised. Brother Gabriel chuckled softly. "News travels quickly here." The abbot invited Thomas to walk with him through the monastery grounds. They passed the herb gardens, the apple orchard, the small cemetery where generations of monks rested beneath simple stone crosses. Every grave looked nearly identical, only a name, 2 dates, nothing more. Thomas stopped beside one weathered stone. This monk lived 91 years. The abbot nodded. He copied books for 68 of them. Thomas smiled. "That's a lifetime." The abbot looked gently across the peaceful hillside. It became many lifetimes. Eventually, they reached the oldest part of the monastery. Here, the stone walls looked darker, the windows smaller. Ancient ivy climbed across every corner. At the end of a narrow corridor stood a heavy oak door reinforced with black iron. Unlike every other door Thomas had seen, this one carried no decoration, only a small carving of an open book, and beneath it 3 simple words: "Read with humility." Thomas studied the door. This must be the room Brother Gabriel mentioned. The abbot nodded. It has remained closed for 96 years. Thomas surprised. Why? Because no one has needed to open it. The abbot reached inside his robe. From a small leather pouch, he removed an old iron key. Its handle had been polished smooth by countless hands. Yet before placing it into the lock, he paused. There is one rule. Thomas listened carefully. No one enters this room alone. Why? The old abbot smiled. Because wisdom grows more safely when shared. The heavy lock clicked. The ancient hinges moved almost silently. Cool, dry air drifted from the darkness beyond. Thomas expected another library, perhaps shelves filled with forgotten books. Instead, he saw only a single long room, wooden tables, several empty chairs, and dozens of unfinished manuscripts resting exactly where someone had left them many decades before. The quills still lay beside the pages. Small bottles of dried ink remained unopened. It looked as though the scribes had simply stepped outside, planning to return before evening, but they never did. Thomas walked slowly between the tables. Every manuscript stopped in the middle of a sentence. One ended halfway through a paragraph, another after only 3 words. A map remained unfinished. A beautiful painted letter A had never been completed. He whispered, "Why did they stop?" The abbot answered quietly, "They didn't choose to. The plague came." Thomas stood completely still. The old abbot continued, 96 years ago, illness reached these mountains. The brothers closed this room immediately. They saved the manuscripts they could, but the work itself had to wait. Thomas gently touched the edge of one unfinished page. "So no one has written here since?" The abbot slowly shook his head.
We promised ourselves that the next person to continue this work would not do so because of duty, but because of understanding. Thomas looked around the silent room. The unfinished manuscripts no longer felt abandoned. They felt patient, waiting, exactly as the great manuscript had waited for him. The abbot placed one gentle hand upon Thomas's shoulder. Books are never truly finished. Neither are the people who write them. He smiled kindly. Tomorrow, if you still wish to return, this room will no longer be waiting alone. As they quietly closed the heavy oak door behind them, Thomas looked back one last time. The unfinished manuscripts disappeared into darkness once more. But now he understood they had never been forgotten. They had simply been waiting for another careful hand to continue the sentence.
The following morning arrived wrapped in silver mist. Clouds drifted slowly through the monastery gardens, softening every stone wall and pine tree until Saint Aurelius seemed to float above the mountains. Thomas woke before the first bell, not because anyone had asked him to, but because his thoughts had never truly left the unfinished room beneath the library. The abandoned desks, the half-written pages, the quills resting exactly where unknown hands had laid them down nearly a century before. It felt less like an empty room and more like a conversation waiting to continue. After morning prayers, Brother Gabriel found Thomas standing quietly beneath the covered walkway. "You've already decided." "I think I have." Thomas smiled. The old monk nodded. "I thought so." Without another word, they walked together toward the oldest wing of the monastery. The heavy oak door stood exactly as it had the previous afternoon. The carved words above it seemed somehow different today. "Read with humility." Thomas realized they were not instructions for entering. They were instructions for living. Abbot Benedict unlocked the ancient door once more. This time, he stepped aside. "You may enter first." Thomas hesitated. "I thought no one entered alone." "You aren't." Brother Gabriel gently smiled behind him. "We're simply allowing you to choose the first step." The cool air inside the room felt unchanged. Dust rested peacefully upon shelves. Morning light filtered through narrow stone windows, illuminating thousands of tiny particles floating gently through the air. Nothing had been disturbed. Nothing had been forgotten. Brother Gabriel handed Thomas a clean linen cloth. "We never begin by writing. We begin by caring." For the next several hours, no words were copied. No ink touched parchment. Instead, the monks quietly cleaned. Thomas carefully dusted every unfinished manuscript. Another monk polished wooden desks worn smooth by generations of scribes. Brother Matthias examined old leather bindings, gently repairing cracked edges with fine linen thread. One younger brother opened the narrow windows for the first time in decades, allowing fresh mountain air to drift through the room. Thomas found the work strangely peaceful. Every small act felt important, not because it was difficult, but because someone had waited 96 years for it to happen. Near one corner of the room stood a tall oak cabinet. Its doors had swollen slightly with age. Together, Thomas and Brother Gabriel carefully opened them. Inside rested dozens of neatly stacked sheets of blank parchment. Thomas lifted one carefully. It remained perfectly preserved. "These were prepared before the plague?" Brother Gabriel nodded. "They expected to use them the following winter." Thomas looked quietly at the untouched pages. "They never did." "No, but today, someone will."
By late afternoon, the room no longer felt abandoned. Sunlight warmed the old desks. Fresh candles replaced those that had long ago melted away. Clean bottles of oak gall ink stood beside newly cut goose-feather quills. Nothing modern had been added, only care. The room seemed to breathe again. Abbot Benedict slowly walked to the center table. Upon it rested the unfinished manuscript Thomas had seen the previous day. He gently opened it. The final sentence stopped after only 7 words. The ink, though faded, remained perfectly readable. The abbot looked at Thomas. "Read it." Thomas spoke quietly. "The wisdom of one generation becomes..." Then, nothing. Blank parchment stretched across the rest of the page. He looked toward the abbot. "What comes next?" The old monk smiled. "That question has waited 96 years."
Thomas said nothing about the light. Not immediately. He had learned during his short time at Saint Aurelius that not every mystery demanded an immediate answer. Some questions became clearer if they were allowed to rest. So, when the morning bell echoed across the monastery, he quietly joined the other monks for prayers as though nothing unusual had happened. Still, his thoughts often returned to the library window. Someone had been there. He was certain of it. After breakfast, Brother Gabriel noticed Thomas unusually quiet. "You slept poorly." It wasn't a question. Thomas smiled. "A little. The mountains sometimes give visitors strange dreams." "I wasn't dreaming." Brother Gabriel looked at him kindly. "No?" Thomas hesitated, then quietly described the figure he had seen writing beside the library after midnight. The old monk listened without interruption. When Thomas finished, Brother Gabriel simply nodded. "I wondered when someone would notice." Thomas blinked. "You mean, you weren't the first?" Instead of explaining further, Brother Gabriel invited Thomas to help organize one of the oldest shelves in the monastery library. The room smelled of leather, cedar wood, beeswax, and centuries-old parchment. Sunlight filtered gently through tall windows, filling the air with tiny floating particles of dust. Every shelf carried handwritten labels: astronomy, medicine, poetry, history, maps, music. Nothing appeared mysterious. Everything seemed wonderfully ordinary. While arranging a collection of weathered manuscripts, Thomas noticed something unusual. Several books carried tiny marks beneath their titles. A small painted candle. The same symbol embossed upon the great manuscript. He carefully removed one volume. Inside the front cover, a single sentence had been written. "Every copy remembers the hand that preserved it." Thomas smiled. It sounded exactly like something the monks would say. By afternoon, Brother Gabriel finally led him to a narrow staircase hidden behind the library shelves. Unlike the staircase beneath the monastery, this one climbed upward, higher and higher, until it reached a small room inside the bell tower. Only one wooden desk stood there, one chair, one narrow window overlooking the mountains. Nothing else. Thomas looked around. "This is where I saw the light." Brother Gabriel nodded. "Yes, but nobody was here." There wasn't. Thomas frowned. "I'm certain I saw someone writing." The old monk rested one hand upon the empty desk. "So did I." Thomas looked confused. "You saw them too?" Brother Gabriel smiled softly. 42 years ago." Silence settled over the room. "I was younger than you. I had just arrived. And one night, I saw a candle burning in this very window." Thomas stared at him. "When I climbed the tower,
The room was empty. Thomas slowly sat in the old wooden chair. The surface had become perfectly smooth after centuries of use. Who used this room? Brother Gabriel looked out across the valley. The eldest scribe of the monastery, the one responsible for reading every completed manuscript before it entered the library. What happened to him? He died almost 100 years ago. Thomas looked back toward the empty desk. So, who was writing? The old monk smiled gently. I no longer ask that question. As evening approached, Brother Gabriel opened the single drawer beneath the desk. Inside rested one object, an old pair of round reading glasses. Their wooden frame had darkened with age. Beside them lay a folded sheet of parchment, untouched. Thomas carefully unfolded it. Only one sentence appeared. Leave every page easier to read than you found it. No signature, no date, nothing else. Brother Gabriel quietly laughed. My teacher found that note, and his teacher before him. No one knows who wrote it. That night, Thomas returned to the scriptorium with new understanding. Perhaps not every mystery required solving. Some simply reminded people to keep working carefully. As candles flickered across the long oak tables, he continued copying the great manuscript, each letter, each word, each careful line. Outside, snowflakes began falling gently across the monastery for the first time that winter. The world grew wonderfully quiet. Brother Matthias looked through the window and smiled. The first snow always brings visitors. Thomas looked up. Visitors? The old monk nodded. Not travelers, books. Thomas laughed softly. I don't understand. You will tomorrow. For just after sunrise, 3 weary monks from a distant monastery would arrive carrying a single wooden chest. Inside it rested a water-damaged manuscript believed to be nearly 500 years old, and whether its fading words could still be saved would soon depend upon Thomas's careful hands.
Snow covered the monastery before dawn. The stone roofs of Saint Aurelius disappeared beneath a soft white blanket, while the pine trees bowed gently beneath the weight of fresh snow. Inside the scriptorium, candles glowed warmly against the cold morning light. Thomas had just sharpened a fresh goose-feather quill when the monastery bell rang 3 slow times. Brother Gabriel looked toward the window. They're here. The great oak doors opened. 3 exhausted monks entered, their wool cloaks covered with melting snow. Each carried one side of a heavy wooden chest. Although the box looked ordinary, every monk handled it with remarkable care, not like luggage, more like something alive. Brother Gabriel hurried forward to greet them. You've traveled far. The eldest visitor smiled wearily. Nearly 6 weeks. And the roads? Worse than we feared. The chest was carried into the warmest room of the library. No one opened it immediately. Instead, the travelers were given hot soup, fresh bread, dry clothing, and time to rest. Thomas quietly asked, "Shouldn't we examine the manuscript first?" Brother Gabriel smiled. The book has waited 500 years. It can wait another hour. The men cannot. Thomas nodded. He was beginning to understand that here at Saint Aurelius, people always came first before parchment. When the visitors had finally rested, Abbot Benedict gathered everyone around the large oak table. The wooden chest was carefully unlocked. Its iron hinges creaked softly. Inside rested layer after layer of clean linen cloth, then soft wool blankets. Finally, the manuscript appeared. Thomas drew a quiet breath. The leather binding had darkened from water. Several pages had curled. The corners showed signs of mold.
One section appeared almost fused together. It looked fragile, almost too fragile to touch. Brother Matthias gently placed his fingertips upon the cover. He closed his eyes for a moment, then smiled. It survived. Thomas looked surprised. Even like this? The old monk nodded. It wants to survive. The visitors explained what had happened. Their monastery stood beside a fast-moving river. Heavy autumn rains had caused the water to rise without warning. Most of the library had been saved, but this manuscript, the oldest in their collection, had fallen into the flood. Several brothers risked their lives to recover it downstream. They succeeded, but the water had already done its work. For months, no one knew how to preserve it. Finally, one elder whispered only 2 words: Saint Aurelius. Thomas carefully opened the first page. The parchment crackled softly. Its writing remained visible beneath faint water stains. Beautiful blue and crimson decorations framed each chapter. Although damaged, the manuscript still possessed extraordinary beauty. Brother Matthias leaned closer. "What do you notice?" Thomas studied the page carefully. "The ink hasn't faded." "Exactly. The parchment suffered. The words remained." For the next several days, the scriptorium changed its rhythm. Instead of copying books, the monks became caretakers. Thin sheets of handmade paper were gently placed between damp pages. Every few hours they were replaced. Special wooden frames supported weakened bindings. Small brushes removed traces of dirt, 1 grain at a time. No one rushed. Every page received the patience of an entire afternoon. Thomas had never imagined that saving a book required so much gentleness. Late one evening, as snow quietly drifted outside, Brother Gabriel invited Thomas to examine one particular page. Unlike the others, this one carried dozens of tiny handwritten notes around the margins. Different handwriting, different centuries. Thomas smiled. Many people added to this. The old monk nodded. Nearly 200 years of readers. They never erased the earlier notes. They simply continued the conversation. Thomas looked thoughtfully at the crowded margins. "It reminds me of the great manuscript." Brother Gabriel smiled. "All good books become conversations." Several weeks passed. Slowly, the manuscript began to recover. Its pages flattened. The leather binding strengthened. Its colors grew brighter as careful cleaning continued. The visiting monks watched with quiet gratitude. One evening, their eldest brother approached Thomas. "You've helped save something our monastery thought was lost forever." Thomas shook his head. "I only followed instructions." The old monk smiled warmly. "Perhaps, but careful hands deserve gratitude too." Before the visitors departed, they offered Saint Aurelius a small wooden box. Inside rested a single silver bookmark shaped like an olive branch. Abbot Benedict accepted it with humble thanks. Then, to Thomas's surprise, he returned the restored manuscript. The visiting monks looked confused. "You aren't keeping it?" The abbot smiled gently. "It has always belonged with you. Our task was never to collect books. It was simply to help them find their way home." The 3 monks disappeared down the snowy mountain road carrying the rescued manuscript safely in their arms. Thomas watched until they became tiny figures among the white pine forests. He turned toward Brother Gabriel. "I think I finally understand. The greatest library isn't the one with the most books." The old monk nodded. "It's the one that helps the most books survive."
The folded note remained in Thomas's hand for several moments. "Tomorrow you will meet the founder." He read the sentence again, then once more. It made very little sense.
Saint Aurelius Monastery had stood upon the mountain for nearly 300 years. Its founder had surely been gone for generations. Thomas quietly looked around the scriptorium. Every monk continued writing exactly as before. No one appeared surprised. No one seemed curious. It was almost as though everyone already knew. That evening, Thomas found Brother Gabriel tending the monastery's herb garden. The old monk carefully trimmed a rosemary bush while humming a hymn so softly that it almost disappeared into the evening breeze. Thomas approached. "I received a message." Brother Gabriel smiled without looking up. "I expected you would. It says I'll meet the founder tomorrow." The old monk nodded gently. "Yes." Thomas frowned. "But the founder has been dead for centuries." The old monk finally looked at him. "Has he?" Thomas laughed quietly. "I don't understand." "You will." "When?" "Tomorrow." The answer sounded almost identical to every other answer Thomas had received since arriving. At Saint Aurelius, important things were never explained too early. The following morning, before sunrise, Abbot Benedict asked Thomas to accompany him beyond the monastery walls. No books, no quills, no satchel. Only warm cloaks against the cold mountain air. Together, they followed a narrow forest path that climbed above the monastery. Snow still rested beneath the pine trees. Every footstep echoed softly through the quiet woods. No one hurried. After nearly an hour, they reached a small stone chapel standing completely alone on the mountainside. It was much older than the monastery itself. Its roof had weathered countless winters. Moss covered many of its gray stones. No bell tower rose above it. No carved statues decorated its entrance. Only one wooden door, and above it, 3 simple words: "Begin again tomorrow." Thomas quietly smiled. "I've noticed every doorway here teaches something." The abbot nodded. Doors are excellent teachers. Inside, the chapel was remarkably simple. A few wooden benches, a small stone altar. Sunlight entered through one narrow window. Nothing more. At least that's what Thomas first believed. Then he noticed the wall behind the altar. Instead of paintings, it carried hundreds of names. Not kings, not bishops, simply monks, one beneath another, each followed by the years they lived. Thomas searched carefully. Finally, he found the first name. Brother Aurelius. No title, no special decoration, just one name, the founder. Thomas looked around the quiet chapel. Where is his portrait? There isn't one. Why not? The abbot smiled. He never allowed one. Thomas was surprised. He refused? The old monk nodded. He believed people should remember the work, not the worker. The abbot gently handed Thomas a very small leather notebook. Unlike the great manuscript, unlike every other book in the monastery, this one could fit comfortably into a single hand. Its pages had yellowed with age. The leather cover had become wonderfully smooth. Thomas opened it carefully. Inside, the handwriting looked surprisingly ordinary. Simple, neat, without decoration. He expected profound wisdom. Instead, the first page read, quote, "Today we repaired the roof before the rain arrived." Thomas smiled. He turned another page. Quote, "Brother Matthew finally learned to sharpen his own quill." Another. Quote, "The apple harvest was smaller this year." Another. Quote, "A traveler stayed for supper." Nothing extraordinary, just ordinary days.
Thomas looked towards the abbot. This was the founder's journal? It was. It doesn't describe building the monastery. No. It doesn't speak about great achievements. No. Thomas turned more pages. They're just ordinary observations. The abbot folded his hands. Exactly. Near the end of the notebook, Thomas discovered one final entry. It had been written only days before Brother Aurelius died. The handwriting trembled slightly, yet every word remained clear. If those who come after me remember my name, they have misunderstood my work. If they remember to care for one another, the monastery will never truly lose me. Thomas slowly closed the little journal. For several moments, neither man spoke. Outside, morning sunlight spread across the snowy mountains. The monastery below looked impossibly peaceful. Smoke curled gently from its chimneys. Tiny figures crossed the courtyard carrying baskets of fresh bread. The bell rang once. Life continued exactly as it always had. Thomas finally understood. The founder had never disappeared. He had simply become part of every quiet act repeated by generations after him. Every carefully copied page, every repaired book, every shared meal, every lesson patiently taught. His life continued not because people remembered his face, but because they remembered his example. As they prepared to return, Abbot Benedict paused beside the chapel door. There is one final tradition. Thomas listened. When a monk has copied 10,000 pages, he plants one tree. Only one? Only one. Thomas looked down the mountainside. For the first time, he noticed an ancient grove surrounding the monastery. Hundreds of tall oak trees, some far older than the buildings themselves. The abbot smiled. Every tree began with a single scribe. Thomas quietly looked across the peaceful forest. He suddenly realized the greatest work of Saint Aurelius had never been written on parchment. It had been growing silently, leaf by leaf, for 300 years. And as the afternoon sun reached the monastery, a messenger arrived carrying unexpected news. A new invention had begun spreading across Europe. A machine that could produce hundreds of books without a single scribe holding a quill.
The messenger arrived just before sunset. Snow still rested upon the monastery rooftops as the sound of approaching horse hooves echoed through the quiet valley. Brother Gabriel looked up from the scriptorium window. "We're expecting no visitors today." Neither was anyone else. Saint Aurelius rarely received unexpected guests. The traveler entered the monastery carrying a carefully wrapped wooden case. Unlike the scholars and monks who usually climbed the mountain, this man wore the clothes of a skilled craftsman. His hands carried small burns. Tiny stains of black ink covered his fingertips. After sharing a warm meal, he introduced himself. "My name is Johannes. I come from the city of Mainz." Thomas had never heard the name before. The craftsman smiled. "I've come to tell you about a new invention." He carefully opened the wooden case. Inside rested dozens of identical printed pages. Not handwritten, printed. Every letter looked exactly like the one beside it. Thomas picked up a page. His eyes widened. These weren't copied by hand. Johannes shook his head. They were printed. One page can become hundreds. The room fell completely silent. Even the scratching of quills stopped.
Brother Matthias slowly examined one printed page beneath the candlelight. "It is beautiful. It is. And fast." Johannes nodded proudly. "A single workshop can produce more books in 1 year than many monasteries can copy in decades." Thomas quietly looked toward the great manuscript resting in the center of the room. A question slowly formed in his mind. If every book can now be printed, then what becomes of Saint Aurelius? No one answered immediately. Instead, Abbot Benedict gently folded his hands. He looked around the scriptorium, at the shelves, the desks, the candles, the countless generations whose careful work still filled every corner. Then he smiled. "We celebrate." Thomas was surprised. "Celebrate?" The abbot nodded. "For 300 years, we prayed that knowledge would become easier to share. It finally has." Brother Gabriel laughed softly. "I thought you might fear this day." The abbot shook his head. "We never copied books to remain important. We copied them so one day fewer books would be lost." He carefully lifted one printed page. "This machine is not our enemy. It is our student." Thomas smiled. "And we are its teachers." During the following weeks, the monks studied the printed pages with genuine curiosity. Some admired their remarkable precision. Others quietly noticed small imperfections. Brother Matthias smiled one afternoon. "Every printed page is identical." Thomas nodded. "Isn't that the point?" "It is. But handwritten pages carry something too." "What?" The old monk looked at his ink-stained fingers. "The quiet patience of the person who wrote them." As winter slowly faded into spring, Saint Aurelius changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly. The scriptorium continued copying the great manuscript. The library continued repairing damaged books brought from distant monasteries. Young scribes still learned beautiful handwriting. But now, they also studied printed books. They welcomed them, protected them, bound them into strong leather covers. Knowledge had gained another path, and Saint Aurelius quietly chose to walk beside it. One peaceful evening, Thomas sat alone in the bell tower where he had once seen the mysterious light. The little wooden desk remained exactly where it had always stood. He opened his travel journal. The pages had slowly filled during the past year. Not great adventures, but ordinary days. The repaired manuscript rescued from the river, the unfinished room beneath the library, the founder who left no portrait, the monks who believed people mattered more than books. He smiled. Perhaps that had been the real manuscript all along. Several years passed. Thomas eventually took his vows and became Brother Thomas of Saint Aurelius. His hair slowly turned gray. New students arrived carrying fresh curiosity. He patiently taught each one exactly as Brother Gabriel had taught him. Leave room in the margins. Write carefully. People before parchment. Read with humility. Simple lessons. Quiet lessons. Timeless lessons. One spring morning, a young traveler climbed the mountain carrying a weathered leather satchel. Inside rested an old folded letter. The young man looked nervous. Brother Thomas smiled warmly as he opened the monastery gate. "You've brought the letter." The young man looked astonished. "How did you know?" Brother Thomas gently laughed. "We've been expecting it." "For how long?" He looked toward the ancient mountains surrounding Saint Aurelius. "Long enough." Far inside the scriptorium, the great manuscript rested peacefully upon its familiar oak table. Its pages had grown thicker through 3 centuries. Its handwriting carried hundreds of different hands.
Its wisdom belonged to none of them alone. One generation had begun it, another had continued it. Many more would follow. Not because the book was ever meant to be finished, but because learning itself never ends. No single monastery spent exactly 300 years copying one book. Saint Aurelius and Brother Thomas are fictional, but the spirit of their story is inspired by real medieval history. Across Europe, monasteries preserved knowledge through centuries of war, famine, fire, and political change. Before the invention of the printing press, monks carefully copied manuscripts by hand, preserving philosophy, science, medicine, literature, music, and history that might otherwise have disappeared forever. When printing finally transformed Europe, many monasteries did not resist change. Instead, they helped preserve both handwritten manuscripts and printed books, ensuring that knowledge continued to reach future generations. Their greatest achievement was never simply copying words. It was protecting humanity's memory. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson Saint Aurelius leaves behind. Books matter. Knowledge matters. But even more important are the patient hands willing to preserve them for someone they will never meet. As evening settles softly over the monastery, the candles are gently extinguished. The last quill is carefully cleaned. The great manuscript is quietly closed, not because its story has ended, but because tomorrow another careful hand will turn the next page.